On November 2, 2007, the small town of Stella, Missouri, experienced an event that would leave an indelible mark on its history. Rowan Ford, a 9-year-old girl known for her bright personality and friendly demeanor, was at home as usual. Her mother, Colleen Ford, had an overnight shift at a local Walmart, leaving Rowan in the care of her stepfather, David Spears. David Spears, a man in his mid-30s, had a friend, Chris Collings, visiting that evening. Collings, 32, was a laborer with a checkered past, but he often spent time with Spears. That night, Colleen left for work around 10 p.m., trusting that Rowan was safe at home. According to Spears, he left Rowan alone at home around 9 p.m. to visit his friends, which included Collings. When he returned later that night, he claimed that Rowan was missing. Spears didn't immediately report Rowan's disappearance, only raising the alarm the following morning when Colleen returned from work and discovered Rowan was not in her bed. Panic set in quickly. Friends, neighbors, and local authorities launched an intensive search for the missing girl. Stella, a community where everyone knew each other, was rocked by the news. Volunteers searched fields, woods, and any possible hiding places, hoping to find any sign of Rowan. As news of Rowan's disappearance spread, neighboring towns joined the search efforts. Local businesses closed early, and schools allowed students to leave classes to help with the search. The tight-knit community banded together, showing an outpouring of support for the Ford family. Missing posters with Rowan's smiling face were plastered everywhere, from shop windows to telephone poles, creating a constant reminder of the urgency to find her. As the investigation progressed, authorities began to focus more closely on those who had last seen Rowan. David Spears' account of the night was inconsistent and raised suspicions. His behavior during the search and initial questioning was also seen as peculiar. During their investigation, law enforcement officers noted discrepancies in Spears' story. His demeanor was also troubling to the investigators, prompting them to look more closely at him and his associates. It wasn't long before Spears and Collings became prime suspects. Under intense questioning, both Spears and Collings began to provide conflicting statements about their whereabouts and activities on the night of Rowan's disappearance. Eventually, the pressure led to both men admitting their involvement in what had happened to Rowan. Welcome to Darkside. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification so you won't miss any case. According to the confessions, on the night of November 2nd, David Spears and Chris Collings took Rowan from her home. They drove her to an abandoned trailer in a remote area of Barry County, Missouri. There, Collings committed the assault while Spears was present. Afterward, they took her to a secluded cave in McDonald County, Missouri. The next morning, November 3rd, Spears reported Rowan missing, setting off the frantic search. The confessions revealed that they had left her in the cave, a place known to locals but hidden from immediate view. The brutality of the crime shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Rowan had trusted the very people who should have protected her, making the betrayal even more profound. A week after Rowan's disappearance, on November 9th, 2007, authorities found her body in the cave. Law enforcement meticulously gathered evidence from the scene, further implicating Spears and Collings in the crime. The discovery site became a somber place of remembrance. Flowers, candles, and stuffed animals were placed at the entrance of the cave, a makeshift memorial from a community grieving a life stolen too soon. The legal process was lengthy and complex, given the nature of the confessions and the evidence. David Spears and Chris Collings were both charged with multiple serious offenses, including murder and child endangerment. In an effort to avoid the death penalty, Spears agreed to testify against Collings, detailing the events of that tragic night. Collings faced trial first and was found guilty of first-degree murder and related charges. In 2012, he was sentenced to death. Spears, facing overwhelming evidence and the testimony he provided, pled guilty to the charges in 2011. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Throughout the legal proceedings, the Ford family and the Stella community attended every hearing, showing solidarity and ensuring that Rowan's voice was heard. To honor Rowan Ford's memory, various initiatives and memorials were established in Stella and surrounding areas. These efforts aim to ensure that Rowan's life was remembered not just for the tragedy that ended it, but for the joy and light she brought to those who knew her. A scholarship fund was created in her name, aimed at supporting local students who embodied Rowan's kindness and love for learning. The case of Rowan Ford remains a poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities children face and the critical role communities play in safeguarding their well-being. Her story is one of a young life cut short, but also one that has galvanized efforts to protect other children from similar fates. Through these ongoing efforts, Rowan Ford's legacy lives on, inspiring a commitment to safety and compassion within the community and beyond. In remembering Rowan, the community of Stella transformed their grief into action, ensuring that her story would not be forgotten and that it would serve as a catalyst for change.
It has been 2 days since someone shot and killed a young Sodas couple, and no one's been arrested.
Investigators say the shooter intentionally targeted 28-year-old Joshua Niles and 24-year-old Amber Washburn, but they did not say why.
On October 22, 2018, the quiet town of Sodus, New York, was about to face a day unlike any other. That afternoon, Josh Niles was in the driveway of his home, engaged in routine tasks. Inside the house, his girlfriend Amber Washburn was with their children, attending to their needs. This seemingly ordinary day took a tragic turn around 2 p.m. when Timothy Dean arrived with a deadly intent. Welcome to Dark Side, your source for detailed case explanations. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more detailed cases. Timothy Dean, a former police chief from Texas, had traveled over 1,500 miles to carry out a plan driven by personal vendetta and the influence of his girlfriend, Charlene Childers. Charlene, Josh's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his 2 children, had been embroiled in a bitter custody battle with Josh. Viewing Josh as a threat to her relationship with her children, she convinced Dean to eliminate this perceived threat permanently. Dean, armed and prepared, approached Josh in the driveway. Without any warning, Dean fired multiple shots at Josh, striking him several times. The gunfire shattered the usual peace of the neighborhood, leaving Josh fatally wounded. He fell to the ground, unable to defend himself or escape. Inside the house, Amber heard the shots and ran outside to find Josh lying motionless. Terrified for her life and the safety of their children, Amber tried to flee. Dean, however, pursued her and shot her multiple times, ensuring she would not survive. Amber's attempt to escape ended in her tragic death, leaving their children without parents and casting a shadow over the community.
Well, I just got home. My car's right there. And I put my coffee cup down on the back of the car, and all of a sudden I heard bang, 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 bang. I thought, oh my God, it's fireworks. But I turned around to see where the fireworks were, and I saw the person shooting the guy underneath the truck. He was already laying underneath the truck, but I can tell the person was stabbing the gun at him, and I could see his body jerk with every round. And then I'm dialing 911 right away. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911.
The neighborhood was thrown into chaos. Neighbors who heard the gunfire called 911, and within minutes, law enforcement officers arrived at the scene. They found the bodies of Josh and Amber in the driveway, clear victims of a violent attack. Police secured the area and began their investigation, while paramedics attended to the traumatized children and neighbors. The news of the murders spread quickly through Sodus, a town known for its tranquility and close-knit community. Residents were in shock, struggling to understand how such violence could occur in their town. The families of Josh and Amber were devastated, faced with the sudden and brutal loss of their loved ones. Law enforcement officers quickly launched a thorough investigation. They gathered evidence from the crime scene, including shell casings and surveillance footage from nearby properties. The nature of the attack led them to suspect it was premeditated. As detectives delved into the backgrounds of Josh and Amber, they uncovered the contentious custody battle between Josh and Charlene Childers. They learned about Charlene's relationship with Timothy Dean and began to see a possible motive. Investigators focused on Timothy Dean and Charlene Childers. Dean's travel records showed he had recently flown from Texas to New York, supporting the theory that he came specifically to commit the murders. Phone records and communications between Dean and Charlene suggested a conspiracy to kill Josh. Charlene, it seemed, was desperate to gain full custody of her children and saw Josh as an obstacle. She had influenced Dean to believe that removing Josh was the solution. The evidence indicated Charlene had encouraged and possibly orchestrated the plan, with Dean executing the violent act. With enough evidence, law enforcement moved quickly to arrest Timothy Dean and Charlene Childers. Dean was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and other related offenses. Charlene was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and related charges. The arrests brought some relief to the community, but the pain of the murders lingered. Families and friends of Josh and Amber struggled to cope with their loss and the horrific nature of their deaths. The legal proceedings were widely covered by the media. The prosecution built a strong case against Dean and Charlene, presenting evidence of premeditation, conspiracy, and the brutal nature of the murders. They detailed the planning involved, including Dean's travel and the communications between him and Charlene. During the trial, emotional testimonies from family members, friends, and law enforcement officers painted a clear picture of the events leading to the murders. The prosecution emphasized Charlene's role in encouraging Dean. Charlene's defense argued she did not intend for the situation to escalate to murder. However, the evidence of her communications and planning undermined this claim.
Charlene Childers, the wife of the Texas man accused of killing Joshua Niles and Amber Washburn in Sodus last October, pleaded guilty to manslaughter this morning as part of a plea deal.
Dean's defense faced challenges due to the direct evidence linking him to the crime. His background as a former police chief highlighted his ability to plan and execute the murders. Both Timothy Dean and Charlene Childers were found guilty. Dean was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Charlene received a lengthy prison sentence for her role in the conspiracy and the premeditated nature of the crime. Although the emotional scars from the murders would never fully heal, the community of Sodus continued to support the families, offering comfort and solidarity as they grieved. Josh Niles was a devoted father and partner, well-liked in the Sodus community. Born and raised in Sodus, he was known for his hard work and dedication to his family and friends. Josh was involved in various community activities and had a reputation for his kindness and willingness to help others. Josh's relationship with Charlene Childers started with love and mutual respect. They had 2 children together and worked hard to build a family. However, their relationship became strained, leading to a separation. Despite this, Josh remained a committed father, providing a stable environment for his children. His relationship with Amber Washburn brought new happiness into his life, and together they built a loving blended family. Amber Washburn was known for her caring nature and dedication to her family. Born and raised in Williamson, New York, she moved to Sodus after meeting Josh. Amber was a supportive partner and took on the role of a loving stepmother to Josh's children. Friends and family remember her as warm and empathetic, always putting others' needs before her own. Amber's relationship with Josh was filled with mutual respect and affection. She embraced her role as a mother figure and worked tirelessly to create a supportive household. Her dedication to her family was evident in every aspect of her life. Her tragic death left a void that could never be filled. Charlene Childers was Josh's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his 2 children. Originally from Texas, she moved to New York, where she met Josh. Initially, their relationship was hopeful and filled with plans for the future. They had 2 children and tried to build a life together. However, personal differences and growing tensions led to their separation. After the breakup, Charlene moved back to Texas and started a relationship with Timothy Dean. The custody battle with Josh over their children became a significant source of conflict. Charlene's desire for full custody led her to manipulate Dean into believing that removing Josh was necessary. Her actions and decisions played a crucial role in the tragic events. Timothy Dean was a former police chief from Sunray, Texas. He had a long career in law enforcement, serving as a police officer and later as the chief of police. His background gave him the skills to plan and execute the crime. Dean's relationship with Charlene was marked by his willingness to support her desires, even to extreme lengths. He became deeply involved in her custody battle with Josh, seeing Josh as a threat to Charlene's happiness. Dean's actions resulted in a tragic and violent outcome.
Here's what we know right now. Manheim Township Police say 14-year-old Claire Miller, who lives here with her family at this home on Clayton Road in Manheim Township, called police a little after 1 a.m. and said she had killed her sister.
Claire Miller, a 14-year-old from Pennsylvania, shocked the nation when she murdered her disabled sister Helen and posted the aftermath on TikTok. Claire Miller lived in Manheim Township, Pennsylvania, with her parents Mark and Marie and her 19-year-old sister, Helen Miller. Helen had cerebral palsy and was confined to a wheelchair, requiring constant care and attention. The Miller family appeared to be a typical, close-knit suburban household. Mark worked as a senior engineer, and Marie was a dedicated homemaker who spent much of her time caring for Helen. Claire was an 8th grade student at Lancaster Country Day School, known to her friends and classmates as a bright and cheerful girl, though she was often described as quiet and reserved. Despite the seemingly normal exterior, there were signs of strain within the Miller household. Claire had been struggling with her mental health for some time, grappling with feelings of depression and anxiety. Her parents, focused on Helen's care, often missed the depth of Claire's emotional struggles. Claire's role in caring for her sister added to her stress, as she was frequently tasked with helping Helen, a responsibility that weighed heavily on her young shoulders. In the early hours of February 22, 2021, the facade of normalcy was shattered. Around 1 a.m., Claire made a frantic 911 call, her voice trembling with panic. "I stabbed my sister," she repeated to the dispatcher. When the police arrived at their house on Clayton Road, they found Claire standing outside, her hands and clothes covered in blood. She appeared dazed and in shock. The officers followed her inside to Helen's bedroom, where they discovered a horrific scene. Helen was lying in her bed, a pool of blood around her head. She had been stabbed multiple times in the neck with a kitchen knife. The attack was savage and frenzied, leaving the room in disarray, with blood splattered on the walls and bedclothes. Despite the swift response of the emergency services, it was too late. Helen was pronounced dead at the scene. Claire was immediately taken into custody, her hands still stained with her sister's blood. As the investigation unfolded, the details of Claire's actions became clearer, and the story took on an even darker tone. In the hours following the murder, It was revealed that Claire had posted a video on TikTok showing her covered in blood and the aftermath of her attack on Helen. The video sent shockwaves through the online community and further added to the macabre nature of the crime. Friends and classmates of Claire were stunned by the news. Many described her as a normal teenager who enjoyed typical activities like hanging out with friends, playing video games, and posting on social media. However, some close friends mentioned that Claire had been dealing with significant emotional and psychological issues. They spoke of her struggles with depression and anxiety, noting that she often felt overwhelmed by her responsibilities at home and the pressures of caring for her sister. Claire's online presence provided additional insight into her state of mind. Her TikTok account, which had garnered a modest following, featured videos that ranged from lighthearted dance routines and lip syncs to darker, more introspective posts. In the weeks leading up to the murder, some of Claire's posts hinted at her inner turmoil. She shared cryptic messages about feeling trapped and overwhelmed, though these were often interspersed with seemingly normal content, making it difficult for her followers to discern the seriousness of her distress. The legal proceedings that followed were closely watched by the media and the public, captivated by the shocking nature of the crime and the young age of the perpetrator. Given Claire's age, there was intense debate over whether she should be tried as an adult or a juvenile. Ultimately, the decision was made to charge her as an adult due to the severity of the crime. Claire was charged with criminal homicide, a charge that carried the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence. Throughout the trial, Claire's defense team argued that she was not in her right mind at the time of the murder. They presented evidence of her mental health issues and the overwhelming stress she faced in her home life. The defense team called on several mental health experts who testified about Claire's fragile state of mind. These experts detailed her struggles with depression and anxiety, explaining how these conditions could impair her judgment and lead to a mental breakdown. They painted a picture of a young girl who was overwhelmed by her circumstances and driven to a desperate act by her mental health struggles. The prosecution, however, focused on the brutality of the crime and the premeditated nature of Claire's actions. They argued that Claire had planned the attack on her sister, citing the fact that she had taken a knife from the kitchen and waited until her parents were asleep before carrying out the murder. They presented the knife used in the attack, the blood-stained bedding, and the chilling 911 call made by Claire. The prosecution also played footage from Claire's TikTok video, which showed her immediately after the murder, seemingly detached from the horrific act she had just committed. The trial was a harrowing experience for the Miller family and the local community. It brought to light the hidden struggles within the Miller household and the tragic consequences that can arise from untreated mental health issues. The courtroom was filled with emotional testimony from friends, family members, and mental health experts. Claire's parents, Mark and Marie, were visibly devastated, grappling with the loss of one daughter and the potential incarceration of another. As the trial progressed, the defense team continued to argue for leniency, emphasizing Claire's age and mental state. They highlighted the immense pressure Claire felt from her role in caring for Helen, suggesting that this contributed to her mental breakdown. They argued that Claire needed mental health treatment rather than a lengthy prison sentence.
16-year-old Claire Miller will be tried as an adult. The judge determined Miller will stay in Lancaster County Youth Intervention Center until her trial scheduled for March. Earlier, she's been at the state prison in Muncie. Investigators say Miller admitted to killing her sister Helen back in February of 2021 in their home in Manheim Township. Miller was 14 at the time of the killing.
The judge, taking into account her age and mental health issues, sentenced her to a significant term in a juvenile detention facility, with the possibility of transfer to an adult prison once she turned 18. The sentence aimed to balance the need for justice with the potential for Claire's rehabilitation. The story of Claire Miller is a tragic example of how mental health issues, familial pressures, and the dark side of social media can intertwine to create a perfect storm of violence and tragedy. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of mental health support and the devastating impact that untreated mental illness can have on individuals and their families. Harold Frederick Shipman, often referred to as Dr. Death, stands as one of the most notorious serial killers in history. His crimes were particularly shocking because he was a trusted family doctor who used his position to commit his murders. This detailed account of his life and crimes delves into the sinister actions of a man who betrayed the trust of his community and exploited the medical profession to carry out his deadly deeds. Harold Shipman was born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England. He was the second of 3 children in a working-class family. His father, Harold Shipman Sr., was a lorry driver, and his mother, Vera, was a homemaker. Vera Shipman played a significant role in Harold's upbringing, and he was particularly close to her. Vera's illness and eventual death from lung cancer in 1963 had a profound effect on him. During her illness, Harold observed how doctors administered morphine to alleviate her pain, an experience that may have influenced his later actions. Shipman was an academically gifted student. He attended High Pavement Grammar School in Nottingham and later gained admission to Leeds School of Medicine, where he graduated in 1970. During his time at medical school, Shipman met Primrose Oxtoby, whom he married in 1966. The couple went on to have 4 children together. After completing his medical training, Shipman began his career as a junior doctor at Pontefract General Infirmary in West Yorkshire. In 1974, he took a position as a general practitioner, GP, at the Abraham Ormerod Medical Center in Todmorden, West Yorkshire. However, his career faced an early setback in 1975 when he was caught forging prescriptions for pethidine, an opioid painkiller which he had become addicted to. Shipman was fined, briefly attended a drug rehabilitation program, and was allowed to continue practicing medicine. Despite his early troubles, Shipman managed to rebuild his career. In 1977, he moved to Hyde, Greater Manchester, and joined the Donnybrook Medical Center as a general practitioner. Over the years, Shipman established himself as a highly respected and trusted doctor in the community. He was known for his calm demeanor, professionalism, and dedication to his patients, many of whom were elderly. Shipman's killing spree is believed to have begun shortly after he started working in Hyde. His method was chillingly simple. He administered lethal doses of diamorphine, a powerful opioid, to his patients. He would then either falsify their medical records to indicate that they were in poor health or create false death certificates, attributing their deaths to natural causes. Most of Shipman's victims were elderly women who lived alone. He would visit them at their homes under the pretense of routine checkups or administering treatment, inject them with diamorphine, and leave them to die. In many cases, he would then contact funeral homes directly, suggesting that no post-mortem examination was necessary, and sometimes even comforted the grieving families himself. Shipman's murders went undetected for years, in part because his victims were primarily elderly, and their deaths did not initially raise suspicion. However, over time, a pattern of unexpected deaths among his patients began to emerge. Several of his colleagues and local undertakers noticed the unusually high number of cremation certificates he was signing, but their concerns were either dismissed or not acted upon. In March 1998, a local taxi driver named John Shaw became suspicious after noticing that many of his elderly clients, who were Shipman's patients, were dying unexpectedly. Shaw raised his concerns with the authorities, but it would take a more direct and personal involvement to bring Shipman's crimes to light. The turning point in the investigation came with the death of 81-year-old Kathleen Grundy, a well-known and active member of the Hyde community. On June 24, 1998, Shipman visited Grundy at her home. Later that day, she was found dead. Shipman signed her death certificate, citing old age as the cause of death. Grundy's daughter, Angela Woodruff, a solicitor, became suspicious when she discovered a will that purportedly left nearly £400,000 to Shipman, excluding her and her children entirely. The will was poorly drafted and contained obvious errors, leading Woodruff to suspect forgery. She contacted the police, who launched an investigation. The police investigation, known as Operation Lancet, initially focused on Kathleen Grundy's death. Her body was exhumed, and a post-mortem examination revealed lethal levels of diamorphine. This discovery led to a broader investigation into other deaths among Shipman's patients. Authorities began examining medical records and exhuming bodies of other patients who had died under Shipman's care. They found a consistent pattern: high doses of diamorphine, false entries in medical records, and suspiciously timed deaths. In total, the investigation identified 15 specific cases where Shipman's involvement was undeniable, although it was suspected that the true number of his victims was much higher. On September 7, 1998, Harold Shipman was arrested and charged with murder and forgery. The trial began on October 5, 1999, at Preston Crown Court. Shipman was charged with 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery related to Kathleen Grundy's will. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, including the results of the exhumations, falsified medical records, and testimonies from bereaved families. They demonstrated that Shipman had a clear modus operandi. He would administer lethal doses of diamorphine, falsify records to cover his tracks, and often prey on vulnerable, elderly women who trusted him implicitly. Throughout the trial, Shipman maintained his innocence, showing little emotion and denying all charges. His defense argued that the deaths were natural and that any irregularities in the medical records were due to mistakes or misunderstandings. However, the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution led to a guilty verdict. On January 31, 2000, Harold Shipman was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he never be released. Shipman's conviction shocked the UK and had far-reaching implications for the medical profession. The Shipman Inquiry, led by Dame Janet Smith, was established to investigate how Shipman had been able to evade detection for so long and to make recommendations to prevent similar occurrences in the future. The inquiry found that Shipman had likely killed at least 218 patients, but the true number could be as high as 250. The inquiry led to significant changes in medical practices and regulations in the UK. These included stricter controls on the use of controlled drugs, improved monitoring of doctors, and changes to death certification procedures. The case also prompted broader discussions about the trust placed in medical professionals and the need for better oversight to protect patients. Despite his life sentence, Harold Shipman continued to be a figure of public interest and revulsion. On January 13, 2004, the day before his 58th birthday, Shipman was found hanged in his cell at Wakefield Prison. His death was ruled a suicide. His passing provided some closure for the families of his victims, but many questions about his motives and the full extent of his crimes remain unanswered. Harold Shipman's story is a grim reminder of the potential for evil within trusted institutions. His case highlighted significant flaws in medical oversight and the dangers of unchecked power within the healthcare system. The reforms prompted by the Shipman Inquiry have aimed to prevent such abuses from occurring again, but the shadow of his actions continues to loom large over the medical profession. In the end, Harold Shipman's legacy is one of betrayal and murder on an unprecedented scale. He exploited the trust of his patients and their families, using his medical knowledge to kill rather than heal. The tale of Harold Shipman is one of the darkest chapters in modern medical history. It is a story of a trusted doctor who became a serial killer, exploiting his position to murder potentially hundreds of patients. His actions led to significant changes in medical oversight and regulations, aiming to ensure that such a betrayal of trust can never happen again. The legacy of Harold Shipman is a sobering reminder of the need for constant vigilance and the potential for evil that can exist even in the most trusted professions.